Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Fulfilling Work, Meaningful Life with Anthony Kraker. This week's episode is the first in a two-part series on how to stand out at work. Over the next two episodes, we're going to be talking about how to get noticed at work and make a meaningful contribution to the organization that you're employed with, which will hopefully result in you getting that raise or promotion that you're after, or being rewarded in some other way within the organization or within the industry that you're working in. Now, at the outset, let me just say that one of the ways that we set ourselves apart within an organization is not only being noticed at work, but also making ourselves essential to the organization. Several years ago, when I was a young attorney, had little experience, but was starting to kind of see some success in my employment, I read a book by Seth Godin called Linchpin. The full title is Linchpin, Are You Indispensable? Seth Godin's theory is that you can become essential to your organization. And he says in the first chapter of the book that every successful organization has at least one linchpin. Some have dozens and even thousands of linchpins. And he says that the linchpin is the essential element. It's the person who holds part of the operation together, because without the linchpin, things are going to fall apart. So I wanted to recommend that book at the outset of this episode because it was really helpful to me in starting to think in terms of how do I become a linchpin for my organization, for my firm? How can I make myself indispensable? And when you start thinking in that mindset, you're going to start doing the things that will help you to stand out at work and to be noticed by your superiors and make a meaningful contribution to the organization. And that will in turn result in you being rewarded for that effort, hopefully financially, but also in terms of gaining experience and receiving praise and accolades for your performance. So how do we go about doing this? How can we learn to make a contribution to our employer and set ourselves apart, becoming an indispensable employee, becoming the linchpin? Well, I've learned some things over the years as I've thought about this concept, and I want to share these keys or principles with you that I think will be helpful in pretty much any situation. Let's start with what to do if you're new in a job. If you're just starting out either in your career or maybe you have some career experience, but you're new to the organization. In that situation, there are some things that you have to do before you can start standing out and before you can start making a meaningful contribution and being recognized by those around you within the organization. The first key, the first thing you have to do is to execute your role with excellence. And if you're new to the job, if you don't have any experience in the job, you have to learn how to do that. Executing your role with excellence is essential. Nobody is going to respect an employee who doesn't put their best effort forward and who doesn't produce quality results. That's the first key in being able to stand out and work towards becoming this linchpin within the organization. You have to do the work and you have to do it well. The second key or principle is to gain credibility. Now, this is something that happens over time. You're not going to gain credibility overnight unless you're coming from a situation where you're well recognized in your field and you have already gained quite a bit of notoriety or credibility from your peers. But most of us come into an organization and we have to work toward gaining credibility with our coworkers and supervisors. And we do that by doing good work, by showing up on time, by putting in the best effort that we can day in and day out, and by learning to think critically about problems and analyze problems and show that we are valuable to the organization. We also gain credibility by being easy to work with. I've worked with some really talented attorneys over the years who have not been the easiest people to work with. Now, by and large, most of the attorneys I've worked with have been really awesome, thoughtful people and easy to work with. They don't cause drama, they're not high maintenance. But I have worked with some attorneys who are pretty high maintenance and who can be difficult to interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I've supervised some of those people. That's not the type of person you want to be at work if you want to gain credibility within the organization. So you have to learn to execute your role with excellence, gain credibility, and then the third key or principle is to be positive and to be willing to do whatever is asked. In terms of positivity, when you bring in a positive mindset to the organization, people notice that. But if you're the type of person that is negative, who's always complaining, who's always finding fault with the organization or the protocols and procedures that you have to follow or the decisions made by management, if you're that type of person that brings that negativity, you are not going to be able to stand out, at least not in a good way at work. So you have to be positive and you've got to train your mind, train yourself to be really prudent in what you say and make sure that you're not the type of employee that's just constantly finding fault with the organization or with the people that work there. And along with that, you also have to be willing to do whatever you're asked to do. If you have a job that has specific defined responsibilities, but your boss asks you to help with something else, maybe something that doesn't fall completely in line with those responsibilities, you need to step up and do what's asked. Now, I'm not talking about unethical behavior. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about if you're being asked to do something within the organization that is helpful or essential to the organization, but that may fall outside the normal defined parameters of your specific role, when you do that and you demonstrate your willingness to step up and help and do whatever you're asked, and you do it with a positive mindset, that's going to help you stand out at work. The fourth principle to follow is to avoid gossip. Now, this applies if you're new to the job, but also if you're not new to the job. But it's especially important when you're new to the organization, and it goes hand in hand with not being a negative person. You need to avoid gossip like the plague. Gossip will kill an organization's culture. When you become a contributor to that problem, you're not going to put yourself in a position where you will be noticed and recognized for making a meaningful contribution to the organization. You know, Dave Ramsey talks about how he handles gossip within his organization, and it's essentially a zero tolerance policy. Maybe you get a one-time warning, but he makes it pretty clear that his organization does not tolerate gossip. And he makes that clear from the very beginning of the employment relationship. So if you have a problem, you need to go up the chain, not down the chain, not sideways, but up the chain. Talk to your management if you have an issue. But the moment you begin gossiping about it, that's when you become a problem for the organization. So avoiding gossip like the plague is essential to creating the type of atmosphere in an organization that will foster creativity and interdependence and allow you to synergize, to use an old Stephen Covey term, to synergize with others in the organization. And then the fifth principle, if you're new to the job, and this is really, really important, especially for young people just starting out in their career. The fifth principle is don't start making suggestions or identifying problems at the outset of your employment. When you come into an organization with little experience, or in some cases, no experience, it's not wise to start making suggestions about how to change things. Perhaps you're right out of college and you don't know much about the industry. maybe you don't know much about what the organization does. Maybe you don't know much about the culture of the organization. Whatever it is, if you're new to the organization, it's not going to serve you well to come in and start making suggestions and pointing out problems. Even if you're not doing it in a gossipy sort of way, even if you're going up the chain, you need to take some time, allow yourself some time to get acclimated to the organization in order to build that credibility that we talked about and to demonstrate to your superiors and your coworkers that you are the type of employee who's going to execute your responsibilities with excellence. And then once you've had some time in the organization and you've gained that credibility and you've shown that you know how to do your job, you're positive, you're willing to contribute, you're willing to do whatever's asked, and you're not the type of employee that goes around gossiping or complaining, then that opens up the door to be able to identify some problems within the organization and to make suggestions to management. Now, those principles that I've just gone through, learn to execute your role with excellence, gain credibility, be positive and be willing to do whatever is asked, avoid gossip like the plague, and don't start making suggestions or identifying problems at the outset. Those principles need to be internalized. You need to apply those principles day in and day out. And if you do that, especially as somebody new to the organization, you're going to set yourself up to be able to contribute in a meaningful way to the growth and profitability of the organization, which will in turn result in you being rewarded for your efforts. You've got to play the long game going into it. After you've done all those things and you've established yourself as a positive contributor, then you can start thinking innovatively, or at least start sharing your innovative ideas if you've already been kind of in that mindset of thinking innovatively. The purpose of a business is to be profitable. And even nonprofits, even if you work in the nonprofit sector, the organization has to have consistent funding and revenue in order to continue to execute its mission and to grow. So when you're wanting to offer innovative ideas, you've got to keep in the back of your mind that the purpose of all of this is to help the organization be profitable, or if you're in a nonprofit, to continue to raise the revenue that the organization needs. It's not going to help you or the organization to offer an innovative idea that doesn't help with the bottom line. Keep that in mind as you're starting to think innovatively at work. And then as you begin to think innovatively at work, the first thing that you should do is observe the systems that are in place already. A good organization is going to have effective systems that help it to be efficient, to increase revenue, to increase profit margin, and to increase productivity so that the organization can grow and be successful in its mission, whatever that might be. One area where you can make a contribution is by evaluating systems that are already in place and asking yourself some questions about those systems. For example, you can ask, is there an area that might be tweaked to make it more efficient? Maybe within the department, maybe within the organization as a whole, look for different areas that might be able to be tweaked in order to increase efficiency, productivity, and profitability. Now, I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes the wheel does have to be reinvented. An organization has to kind of come to terms with the fact that the things that they're doing just aren't working as a whole, and they have to make some dramatic changes. But what I'm talking about is in your role as an individual employee, observing the organization, observing how things are done, and asking yourself, is there an area within the organization that might benefit from a small change, that might benefit from being tweaked in some way to help make it more efficient, more productive, and more profitable. Okay, so that's the first question. Is there an area that might be tweaked in your organization? The second question is there a change to some type of protocol that could help increase the bottom line while maintaining the quality of the product or service that the organization is offering? Organizations, as a part of their systems, put into place protocols for employees to follow. Sometimes those protocols over time, as things change within the organization or the industry, no longer make sense. So that's a great question to ask. Is there a change to a protocol or protocols that could be made that might help the business? Another question that you can ask yourself, that you should ask yourself, is, are there tech measures that can be taken to increase efficiency and productivity, such as updating or improving internal software or programs, or identifying better hardware or equipment that could be used that would be worth the investment? And that's the key. It's got to be worth the investment. It can't just be more convenient. So as you're dealing with problems, as you're identifying those areas that might be tweaked to become more efficient, you're looking at the protocols, ask yourself, is there a way that technology could help us achieve the end result that I'm going to suggest to my boss? And then the last question I'll recommend that you ask is there a reasonably affordable way to improve employee morale that would result in less turnover and increased satisfaction, to the point that the employees in the organization become more productive and efficient? Okay, what do I mean by that? One of the great challenges that any organization has is finding and keeping talent. So employee morale is important. You want your employees to be happy if you're the owner of an organization, and you especially want your most talented employees to be happy. One of the ways that employees are rewarded for their work is through financial compensation, but there are also other ways to improve employee morale and keep people happy within the organization. And sometimes they're very minor changes that need to be made. But if you can identify a way that's reasonably affordable, that's not going to result in significant costs to the business, that can improve the morale of employees within the organization and decrease turnover, and at the same time help make the employees more productive and efficient, that can go a long way toward getting noticed at work and standing out. So those are some questions that you should be asking yourself once you start thinking innovatively within the organization. What ideas can you come up with to help the organization grow, to become more efficient, more profitable, more productive, and so forth? In addition to looking at the systems that are in place and asking those questions, you also need to make sure that there's a way for your superiors to measure the success of your suggestion. If you come to your boss with a suggestion about how to be more productive, be more efficient, increase profitability, but you don't have any way to measure whether your suggestion is successful, it's not worth the time of your boss. An organization, a good organization, is not going to change protocols, change systems, change programs within the organization if they don't have a way to measure its success. So you need to think about that as you're thinking innovatively and coming up with these ideas to help yourself stand out at work. Okay, so we're going to leave it there for today. Next week will be part 2 in this series on how to stand out at work, and we'll continue our discussion about things that we can do once we've established ourselves as a positive contributor to start thinking innovatively and offering innovative solutions and suggestions to our employers. And then I'll share a couple of examples with you, real life examples. One where a suggestion probably wasn't a great idea, and another where a suggestion was a good solution for the employer. And then we'll also talk about what to do if it seems like your employer isn't receptive to your suggestions or to hearing your ideas on how to improve things at work, improve systems that are in place, or improve other areas within the organization. So stay tuned for that. Before signing off today, let me just remind you that if you go to my website, fulfillingworkmeaningfullife.com, and you sign up for my newsletter, I will send you a free download that will help you in your search for better employment. This resource is a 14-day reflection journal for finding or creating fulfilling work. And so just go to the website, fulfillingworkmeaningfullife.com, put in your email address, make sure you confirm the email. You'll get an email to your inbox asking you to confirm that you've signed up. And then I will send you that free download, which is the 14-day reflection journal for finding or creating fulfilling work. And you'll also be subscribed to my monthly newsletter. Thank you so much for listening. I'll sign off now. Until next time, let's make it a meaningful week.